Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Welcome to another electrifying episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Today, I have the immense pleasure of hosting Christian Hammer, a true Renaissance figure in the world of technology, entrepreneurship, and the arts. With a career spanning more than 3 decades, Christian's journey is a tapestry of innovation, resilience, and unwavering dedication to his craft. Throughout his career, Christian has left an indelible mark on some of the industry's most iconic companies, including Nike, AppNexus, and Wayfair. His visionary leadership and groundbreaking initiatives have propelled these organizations to new heights, earning him a reputation as a true trailblazer in the tech sphere. Today, as the CEO of Vala AI, Christian continues to push the boundaries of innovation, spearheading initiatives that redefine the way we approach software management. His relentless pursuit of excellence and unwavering commitment to driving positive change have solidified his status as a thought leader and influencer. Today, we're going to take a journey through his remarkable career, exploring the evolution of technology, the art of entrepreneurship, and the endless possibilities that lie ahead. Christian, welcome to the conversation.
Lisa, that was a lovely entry. I love that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well, I'm glad that you loved that. The audience sometimes prefers to hear a little bit about your journey from you. Would you kind of take us on a trip through your journey and what's brought you to today and why what you're doing now is so important?
I'd love to. So everybody's got their origin myth, and I don't know how true mine is because it's told by my parents. But at a very young age, I started a company in daycare. I don't know how old I was, but young, right? And it was, I remember this part, the origami throwing stars that I had learned how to do. And then I trained some kids to make them. And then they gave them to me and I sold them to other kids. And that's kind of where I started my entrepreneurial journey. But the first time I started a real company was in 1994, and it was a reaction to Mosaic coming out. I had already been doing internet-based development with like CGI Perl for a local university and things like that, and saw this new thing and said, that's going to change the world, and I want to be part of it. And I was just young enough to believe that, and started my first, agency designing websites for the first browsers coming into the world. And then just pursued one after another, had a pretty strong thesis on what would move online and why and what order based on, and I'm actually giving another talk on this subject, based on how close it was to a digital product versus a physical product and how much overlap and how easy it was to ship being like a separate axis on a graph, and accurately predicted which ones would come out when, which is what eventually led me to Wayfair when one of the items I said that would never be sold online, being furniture, was successfully being sold online. And I wanted to go find out, how are they doing this? How is this working? And met some great people in doing it. But the first part of my career was really defined by entrepreneurial pursuits, startups, rapid fire, lots of failures, of course, and eventually shifted into helping larger companies understand how to become disruptive, innovative themselves. So bringing that entrepreneurial spirit to Nike was the first real chance I had at that. That's also where I met my co-founder for Vala. He was the chief technology officer at Nike when I was the entrepreneur, and our jobs were diametrically opposed. My job is to come in and disrupt, which frankly means break things. His job was don't let people break things. And so we had an interesting dynamic, but it worked very, very well together. And even though I went off to AppNexus after that, then Wayfair, TradeLens, which was a joint venture between IBM and Maersk that involved the World Bank and all these other very large organizations, we stayed in contact. And when I said, I'm gonna do this thing to solve the problem that's been going on for 40 years that we've never been able to solve, finally, he said, well, are you looking for a co-founder CTO? And I was like, yeah. And he said, well, what are you looking for? I told him. He goes, well, it doesn't sound like me, but if you'd have me, I'd love to do it. And so thus began the journey with Vala. And what we're doing, since I didn't say that at all, is tech debt's crippled most of these organizations. Even the early startups that we did would accumulate poor decisions rapidly, largely because people like me were the founder and we like to get our hands dirty in code, but I wasn't coding for sustainable, supportable, scalable. I was coding to get it out the door fast and find out if anybody wanted it. And so even those early ones that didn't have much, it wasn't a big team, there wasn't a lot of time, they were still full of things I regretted. And as you go to larger companies, that's all there is. The average software engineer at a large company spends 40% of their time just dealing with past decisions and trying to understand them and resolve them. And so I said, we can finally solve this. There's this thing called large language models that understand how to talk to a human the way that a human wants to be spoken to, which breaks it's kind of like pulling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz in that moment when the wizard's like, ignore the little man behind the curtain. I feel like as software engineers and technologists, we were that person behind the curtain. And finally, the curtain's been pulled back and anybody can now talk to a computer and the computer understands them in their own language. And that opened the opportunity to really solve this problem in an interesting way. So we went about doing exactly that.
That's awesome. So let's talk about a couple of the threads that you laid out there for me. So I love the idea that your co-founder, right? The two of you really have a yin and yang relationship, right? You're coming at things from very different perspectives, diametrically opposed probably thinking, but that actually keeps each of you challenging the other. And that allows for innovation to continuously happen.
100%. The worst thing you can end up in is an echo chamber where what you're saying, everybody's just repeating it back to you. You're not challenging anything, which means you can't disrupt anything.
Yeah.
And I have the same thing. I'm also an artist, which is not a terribly big surprise, but you can see my stuff at c-hammer.com. But I never got better painting or anything else by somebody saying, hey, that's great, you're so good at that. The only time I got better is when somebody look at it critically and say, it's a little bit off, and here's what I don't like about it. And I find that very refreshing because people are afraid to give critical feedback. And if you're good but not great at something, the thing you most crave is critical feedback because I know I'm okay, but I want to be great at it. Tell me how I can be better. And in business, especially as an entrepreneur, finding those people that can tell you with good response, not just saying you suck, but saying like, you suck, but here's how it could be better, is something you should be seeking out. And having a co-founder that is happy to do that, and conversely, me being the same with him, has been a very powerful thing. And I really appreciate it.
Well, and it's a foundation that you had over time, right? The two of you, I'm getting from the way you tell the story, like, and trust each other, right? And so those hard conversations are so much easier to have once you have that foundation.
Exactly. But you should be trying to get everybody to have those with you. And it is hard, especially if there's a power dynamic, like a difference in roles can often set that up, right? If you're the CEO founder and they're just a person working on the team, it's going to be very hard for them to feel comfortable saying, hey, Christian, I think that's a dumb idea. Here's how we could do a better job, or here's how we could do it better. But you do want that because the more eyes, and especially when you're a small team, you need everybody paying attention to everything, which sounds terrible, but you do. You need those eyes and ears out in the world and telling you, hey, did you see this? We need to rethink it and challenge it. Because if they just blindly go along with you, then you haven't multiplied your own impact. You're still just one person. There just happens to be 5 of you.
And absolutely true. And the power of what you're describing, right, is a group of people who are empowered to challenge ideas, to propose other options and alternatives, and to build a culture between those team members of striving for what is better. And it's not about the person. Christian's not stupid. The idea may not be the best idea. And that's okay.
No, then that's great. That's great. I mean, I mentioned Wayfair and me going there because they showed me that something I believed and had been true for 30 years was no longer true. And I didn't look at it and go, oh, they're going to fail. I said, wow, how they do that. I want to understand it.
Yeah.
And constantly seeking out that, like, if you end up being the smartest person in the room, you need to go to a different room. I very strongly believe in that. And I'm always seeking out, where do I not understand something? Where am I wrong? Because that's where I learn. And we should always be learning.
And through your journey, you also, touched on the idea that, technical debt happens because, and every business has it, but it happens, right, because we're trying and we're doing and we're making choices and decisions. And as entrepreneurs and founders in the beginning, we're saying yes. And we're not thinking and planning for what that future looks like. And it becomes very painful over time. And the larger the business, the bigger the pain. So large corporations hurt a lot.
Yeah.
But even entrepreneurs, we can build this pain in months and years in the beginning, and we can get stuck with it. So let's talk about how, right, all those great intentions of getting things out the door, that first minimum viable product to the market, bites us in the ass, and what you're doing to fix it.
And the biting us in the ass part, it's for whatever reason, and I fully reject this notion, software has the sunk cost fallacy like baked into it. And I think it's because most people, it is the person behind the curtain, the wizard pulling it, and they don't understand it. And so they don't understand that it's really just temporary positions of magnets on a disk, right? Like it's ephemeral. Think of it as ephemeral. Does it meet your needs? And if it doesn't, the easiest thing to do is to blow it away and build something new. It is not to refactor what you have, as much as most people believe. It's just easier to incrementally add. That's not true. It's actually easier just to replace. So what happens within companies, especially larger ones, and it happens from day one. I like to think of software as a game of telephone, right? So the customer has wants and needs and desires.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell you as the entrepreneur in whatever interaction you have with them, maybe it's just a phone call, maybe you've sat with them for hours, maybe you were the customer, right? You translate that into some kind of plan. You say, oh, I've got it. I've got the vision for this thing. I'm going to go build it. And then maybe you build part of it and you get part of that right. But you bring more people in and you tell them, here's my plan. Here's the story. That's another translation. It goes into their mind now, right? Now they interpret that their way and they do something with it. Maybe they write code. Maybe they write documentation. Maybe they start talking to customers and get another interpretation in, whatever. It works its way until the final step, which is a software engineer now has all that information through that conversation, that phone call coming in, and they now translate it into a language the computer speaks. They write code. Every single step in that chain, and this is why it happens from the very beginning all the way up, and it's worse in a big company. Every step in that chain is a chance for loss of signal, right? It's been misinterpreted in some way. So what I want to do is I want to eliminate as many nodes from that as I can so that I can get it as close to customer wants code, the computer gives. So how do I eliminate all those? Now, that doesn't mean I'm trying to eliminate jobs. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to eliminate the loss of fidelity of the information coming through. So there are many ways we do that. The first, and this sounds like a complete 180, is that I said that it's ephemeral and that you should just blow it away. But the reality is in a large company, they have a lot of systems that if they did blow away, if they got rid of it, they'd have to retrain massive teams, right? Or customer integrations that they'd have to redo, which means the customer's going to go somewhere else, right? So there is no willingness to change that. So the first thing you have to understand is, okay, then what does everything do? How does it interrelate? And the most painful point of that is usually post some kind of merger or acquisition, right? I've brought in this new company. They have a different ERP. Now I need to talk with mine, right? Those moments are extremely stressful. They're extremely expensive. They're extremely risky. The customer, and I can think of one of our customers, might expect, hey, I already integrated with you, and now you offer this new service. Since I'm already integrated, just give me that service. And you have to say, but you haven't integrated with the thing that they use. well, they're not going to accept that. They want it done. So what happens, and this is where tech debt really starts to balloon and accumulate, is people start wrapping around what is there, but they don't know everything that's there, right? So the first part is discovery. What do you have? What does it do? How does it interrelate? And when new things come in, that gives you the opportunity of saying, okay, that kind of does the same thing as this over here. Give us a shim that allows those two things to talk to each other. But the first thing we do is we give them a map. And I used to say that the best part of the map was the undiscovered country. Like on old time maps, if they didn't know what was there, they'd draw dragons and monsters, they're Darby dragons. That's really true in our technology. If you don't know what's there because there's no team on it, there's no documentation, there's no testing, maybe nobody knows anything about it, that should be scary. That should be something you worry about. But the problem with that is nobody knows it exists, right? It's there. It happens when you do that integration, when they're like, okay, we integrated with this system. Wait, what system? What are you talking about, right? That happens actually quite frequently. So that's what we provide first. Here's your map. There be dragons. By the way, you've got some zombies and orphans around too.
You can't ever discount the zombies and the orphans. I had a client and we were doing work and it was a customer journey experience, but right, that's supported ultimately by systems. And the zombie is known in infamy as the Friday 3 p.m. report. Nobody knows what it's supposed to do, why it was there, but if something wasn't in the folder every Friday at 3 p.m., bad things happened. And they had built systems around putting a blank Word document with the date and time, right? With the date of Friday at 3 p.m. so that whatever it was kept working. And yes, we did try not to do it and bad things did happen. But right, we figured out what they were at that point and went about fixing them. But oh my gosh, zombies.
Oh man, my favorite is this weird thing that occurred, and it was with a company that we've already mentioned. There was about 1,000 lines of JavaScript in this file that was basically just gobbledygook. And because what had happened, I think over time, as people have been like just commenting out other sections, but at the very top of it says, do not remove, this will break everything. And I was like, it's just comments. Every software engineer in the team did this. It's just comments. What could possibly break it? So you'd remove it and then it would break everything. And you're like, well, how? Well, because at some point in the whole process, there was a thing that was interpreting the JavaScript and compressing it, and it was looking for that block for whatever reason. And if it didn't see it, it just wouldn't build it wouldn't minify the package and send it out. And that would cause everything to break. It's like, but it's JavaScript and it's comments. Like, what could possibly happen?
Well, right. The most dangerous question, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, everything
Could go wrong. Everything could go wrong. As you're looking at this, so with your clients, you're looking at their environment, you're understanding and creating the map, including the question marks of those scary spots where you're the unknowns, and the unknowns are always the most terrifying things. Around this, from my perspective, right, there's people and there's processes that run and make all of these things happen. How do you tie those pieces in, or are you really just looking at the technology?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, tech debt and the thing we're trying to solve is a people problem. It almost always is. I mean, even what I described as that telephone game is honestly a mistranslation, usually because of people. Yeah. The technology, all we're trying to do with the technology is to get facts and then let the people make the opinions about the facts. And when I say facts, like a date is a fact, but a time of arrival estimate is an opinion, even though they both come out of a system. And how those two things interrelate, that's the business. That's what they do. We will provide you with the facts. It is your job to put in the opinions. However, we will document and record those in the system so that you can change your mind as you go.
Right, because for me, the formula is always people plus process times technology equals the ability to grow and scale.
Indeed.
And so having those peoples in the process, right, you can't, the technology only really does what we ask it to do.
Yeah, and actually, that's our mission. And I've said this from the beginning with the team. I don't think of our job as to eliminate anybody. I think of our job as to empower everybody. There's what is it? Software ate the world, and AI is eating software. And I'm like, yeah, but it also broke the world. I think of my wife's a great example of this. So she's got the alphabet soup after her name, advanced degrees and certifications and all that. And she gets hired by big companies to do that knowledge, to bring all that to bear. But what she ends up doing is managing technology that was supposed to help, but doesn't. It hinders. And I kept looking at that problem going, I don't understand how we got here. How did we get from the point where the technology, which is supposed to automate the mundane, now we as humans are managing the technology, which is utterly ridiculous. Yeah. It's supposed to empower us. So that's what we've tried to very much focus on. I don't want to make the decisions for the business. I don't want to tell them how to do a better job with their customers. What I want to do is eliminate the need for the human to manage the technology anymore, for the technology to understand the human needs and to do the mundane. Our original selling point, which we've changed, my team hates me even saying it, is like, we're just janitors. We're trying to clean up the mess so you don't have to.
And I understand why your team hates that, but it is incredibly descriptive and it's accurate, right? Because going back to your point from the beginning of your career, right? We were putting things out there fast and dirty and right, MVP, and we forgot to improve on our minimum viable products over time. And so there's lots of things that are sitting out there that, maybe we don't regret them, but we never nurtured them and continuously improved them into what they could be.
Well, one of the things that I keep going back to is that, and it's not the Agile Manifesto's fault, but it is the Agile process largely to blame for some of this. And it's because we tend to think of incremental addition and never the question of what can I remove or should I remove, right? And I think that a lot of this stems from that. People are always like, oh, I need to add a feature. My customers need to have more from me, rather than saying, hold on, are we actually addressing the problem? Are we helping them in any meaningful way? And if not, is there something we've put out there that is hindering that? So and I try to do it with my team. I've always tried to do this with my team. If you're going to add a feature, you're going to remove two. Tell me what they are. Now, it doesn't mean we're actually going to do that, but I do want to think. I want you to think about it.
Yeah. And I thank you for stopping and clarifying that, because it is important. And I think that it's systemic and that it happens in businesses everywhere. We're putting out. And we forget that part of the equation is sunsetting that which no longer adds value. And I've used the phraseology, and I know that it resonates for you, right? Because this is the work you do, but these are all about enabling customer journeys.
Yes.
And if our customer is not getting value out of features and functionality, there's no reason that they should be in the systems any longer. And likewise, in the bigger macro part of the business, if there is activity happening in a sales department, an HR function, whatever it is that ultimately cannot be, you can't tie it to adding value to the customer, we should be asking why we're doing it and if it you can get rid of it.
Yeah, and this is a really important part of it for me that I've reflected on a lot. The addition piece, like every line of code, I want to think of as liability, right? It's a risk that it could fail. It's a risk that it could be security flaws. It's a risk that somebody will misinterpret it later and screw it up, whatever. It's risk. Yeah. And so whenever I do something, I'm always looking at the opportunity to remove, because I want to decrease the risk surface. If I'm just adding, I'm just increasing that. And this is the trend that I watched happen that caused me to eventually create Vala was how many software engineers does it take to do today what I need the business to do? Forget adding, just to maintain. So 30 years ago, things that I wrote individually now have teams of hundreds of people working on them. Is it doing 100 times as much? Now, it might have 100 times as much functionality. It might have a lot more features to it, but is it actually providing 100 times the value or doing it for 100 times as many customers? And the answer almost universally is no. We have made more complex systems, microservices architecture and all of that, which I fully support, scalability, all of that. But the issue that we ended up creating was this massive amount of maintenance load that just sits out there that we all have to do. It went from I don't remember ever having a conversation about tech debt at the beginning and that general burn of maintenance, how much time you spend just maintaining. It was close to zero, but now it's 40% of a developer's time. Well, that means that you have to have that many more developers just to maintain, right? But more and more of the world is being automated. More and more of the world is having technology enablement. So we went from, at no point in my career, and this is still, I think, true, have we ever globally needed less than twice as many software engineers as we have. So if there was 1 million 30 years ago and there's 30 million today, we needed 2 million 30 years ago and we need 60 million today, right? And I think that that will always be true. And I can't figure out if we're doing it intentionally. Like we're like constantly creating things that only we understand so that, right, so that you leave me alone behind the curtain and I can pull my levers. Like as a whole community of engineers, if that's what we're doing, or if it's just our desire to constantly create and the needs of the business to go so fast, create an environment that just continuously adds another layer to the snowball and it just keeps growing. Bloat and software, very similar, right? Like how many libraries are underneath it and how big are each of those libraries and how many more am I going to add? It's just insane.
Yes. And we've lost, right? We've created complexity. And I think that part of it is for creating a sense of my value to, right? I am adding value by adding feature sets and functionality for all of the best reasons, right? It's not done with malice, right? But when you amplify it out to everything, it is really big. But I think that, there's the opportunity in what you're doing and how you're approaching and looking at, the future, right? And going back to the idea that I would say finding elegance and simplicity, right? How do we get rid of the two things when we add something new? How do we make every action we take intentional so that we're driving value to our customers?
I think it's the only way forward. I mean, we've gotten to the point where the complexity of most of these is not, especially in a large organization, most systems cannot be understood by an individual any longer. It does take AI to understand the complexity. And that's not sustainable because anytime you bring anybody to it, you can't train them to understand it, which just means they're going to add yet another level of complexity, another thing to it to expand it no matter what. And that swallows the world in the bad way, right? We load it down in bloat that provides no value.
So we've just explored sort of how we've gotten to this point where we're dealing with an interesting amount of technical debt. We have code that isn't adding value. We have feature sets that don't add value. And you're coming to market and bringing in an approach to start addressing this. When you look forward, what is the change and the impact that you're making with Vala?
Yeah, ultimately it is the bridge between the technology and the needs of the business. I do think that all the product managers that have ever worked with me know that I believe this. Most product managers provide very little value. Occasionally, they provide over like a huge amount of value. Like sometimes it's outsized in an incredible way. And this isn't I'm not picking on the industry or on the role. It's that they get put into a position where they're responsible for an existing thing. And now the only way forward is to add functionality because that's how my goals are met for the quarter and I get bonuses, right? So the incentives have been stacked against them in a terrible way. But the ones that are great are really the ones that have mastered that the business needs, the customers need, and translating that into technology offerings. And I believe, and what we're trying to empower is a lot more of that. How can I eliminate as many steps from you get it, you understand what the customer and business needs, and the technology just exists to do that. And I think Steve Jobs was talking about it when Visual Basic came out, and that was a Microsoft product, but Steve Jobs was talking about it. Finally, we have a way for me to speak as a human being and the computer to understand it and do exactly what I want, right? Which is absurd thinking about it, but we are at that point. We're not 100% of the way there. There's a gap to fill, and it's incredibly difficult in these very large, complex organizations, but we're trying to be that bridge. say, you wish this to occur, your customers desire this to occur, just tell it and let it do the rest.
That is absolutely fabulous. Audience, today, Christian and I have talked through the evolution of coding and what we've created in software and how it has, one, drives business forward, but two, has also hindered us in the tech debt, in the mindset of we've created complexity rather than finding the elegance in the simplicity. And with Vala AI, Christian and his team are looking at a way to bring that back so that we're truly driving value to our customers through products that matter and make a difference, rather than just perpetuating an ongoing loss of fidelity that exists in the machine today. So the underlying thesis that Christian is working with is really, if we remove the risk of what's happened over the years, we're creating a much more effective set of systems where we're making a truly positive impact and not just adding more noise to the systems that support our businesses. Christian, I've had a wonderful conversation with you today. Thank you so much. If people are interested in learning more, where should they go to find you?
The best place is vala-ai.com. But you can also check me out on christianhammer.io. I'm always on LinkedIn, and the podcast, which is Techtastic.
Absolutely awesome. All of those links will be in the show notes for the audience. And you guys know the rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Every single week, one lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win the grand prize drawing, a $15,000 private VIP day with Lisa Levy. And be sure to head over to disruptandinnovate.com and get your free copy of Lisa's gift. And join us on our next episode.